Hi guys, hopefully all of you are doing well. Today we're going to be making roasted Brussels sprouts and bacon with a balsamic reduction. We're going to take this vegetable along with a few more ingredients and turn it into something that everyone is going to love. Let's get into it. I'm going to start off by taking my balsamic vinegar, 16 ounces, and I'm going to pour it right in my measuring cup. And I'm doing this for the purpose of you being able to see how much we're going to reduce this balsamic vinegar. Just a quick tip, be sure and turn on the exhaust hood over your stove because sometimes when you're reducing vinegar, the fumes can sometimes make your eyes water, just like boiling peppers. So just turn on the exhaust over your stove and you should be fine. So I'm going to bring it up to a boil and then I'm going to turn it down to about medium, just so it can simmer real slow and reduce down. Remember, we started with 2 cups. So as you can see, it starts to lessen, but it gets a little thicker, a little syrupy. I took it down to about 2/3 cup. Some people will reduce it down to about 1 cup, but as you can see, it's a much richer product. So we're just gonna let that sit aside and cool. I'm gonna have my roasting pan handy, the one that I use for roasting, and I'm gonna start by roasting my bacon on a rack so all the fat can render out and we can save that for our Brussels sprouts. Since we're roasting the Brussels sprouts at 425 degrees, I also cooked the bacon at that temperature. So it only take about 15 or 20 minutes. So I'm just gonna take 1 large onion and I'm gonna give it a slice, put that aside, and now I have the Brussels sprouts. As you can see, they look like light bulbs. They're huge. And I just saw them in the store and I was like, oh, how beautiful, but they are large. So instead of just cutting these in half, I decided for the larger ones, which was most of them, I cut them in quarters. All you have to do to trim these is to cut off the ends right there at the base, just like that. And then what we're going to do is peel out the outside leaves. If those leaves look good, great. But if they don't, if they're kind of scarred up, you can just peel those outer layers off, just like a cabbage. It's a very small cabbage, intensely flavored. And you go ahead and wash them again. I went on and rinsed them a second time, and I just cut them into quarters. By the time I was done with the Brussels sprouts, the bacon was done. And I just put that on a paper towel to drain. And then on my pan, now again, this is my roasting pan. This is the pan I use for roasting. That's why it's not as cute as the others. But you just take the bacon fat, and I'm just scraping the bacon fat on the bottom of the pan so you can see how much I had out of this center cut bacon. If you use a fattier bacon, of course, you're going to get more fat. I only had about 3 tablespoons of bacon fat in the pan. And I had to do the Brussels sprouts in 2 batches. So this is actually a little more than half, but I ended up taking some off because you don't want to overcrowd the pan. If you overcrowd the pan, the Brussels sprouts will steam and they won't roast and get nice and charred and crispy. You can season the Brussels sprouts up any way you like. You can take some granulated garlic, smoked paprika, salt, pepper, all of your favorite seasonings. It's time to pull those down out of the cabinet and use them. I also use some dried herbs. I got a question about dried herbs. Let me explain how to use dried herbs and fresh. The basic rule for swapping out fresh herbs for dried herbs: if a recipe calls for fresh herbs, they may be replaced with dried herbs using half the measurement. So if a recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley, you can use 1 tablespoon of dried parsley. I'm just going to roast the Brussels sprouts at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes or until they reach the desired tenderness. So that's up to you. Just make sure you're going there in that oven and give them a flip once in a while if you leave them in there longer than 20 minutes. For those of you who want to keep this dish strictly vegetarian, you don't have to use the bacon fat. You can use olive oil, which is what I had to do for the second batch, which is right here. I just used olive oil straight across, seasoned them up, and kept it going. Even though these Brussels sprouts don't take that long to cook, you can cook this dish ahead and reheat it the next day. Our balsamic vinegar is nice and cold. It's coating the back of the spoon. It's nice and thick. I'm just going to go over the top with our chopped bacon, and then I'm just going to drizzle that sweet and tangy balsamic vinegar right over the top. Thank you guys so much for joining me. You know I appreciate it when you come cook with me and hang out. Don't forget this recipe and others can be found at gdseasoning.com. And I'll see you guys next time.